This part of the talk should be more relaxed for all of us. Best practices for publishing a scientific paper. And I want to sweep from the project to the advertising. So what we will talk about. Where's my cursor here? First, we will see what is a paper. What is a scientific paper? Essentially, it's the summary of the report of a scientific project, which is organized in a particular way. It is made accessible to the community and is reproducible and replicable. What is a summary? A summary, a paper, is a paper is a summary of a research report, but it has to be organized in a proper way, published in a proper way, and it should promote the advancement of science as a whole. I have to fix my windows here, just a second. Well, never mind, yes, here we are. So the classical organization of a paper, of a scientific paper, is IMRAD. IMRAD stands for Introduction, Methodology, Results, and Discussion. When you look at your computer and you only see a blinking cursor and you don't know how to start by section, introduction, section, methodology, section, results, section, discussion. That is the best way to start a scientific paper, even if later on you break the structure into pieces. But that is the way to start. What do you have to tell in the introduction? State your hypothesis clearly. In other words, what is the scientific question that you want to answer? Do not start by saying, I did this, I saw that. No. What are you studying? What is the scientific question, in particular, that you want to answer? How you tackled this problem? So the methodology. And the scientific question needs something which is very important, a review of the literature. And this is so important that I will mention a couple of tools which enhance a review of the literature. Then you have to mention an outline of the methodology. Is this an experimental paper? Is this a theoretical paper? Is this a computational statistical paper? You have to tell the reader what kind of methodology you use. It's a good idea to state in the introduction the main results, and you should highlight the main aspects of your discussion. What is the methodology? In the methodology, you have to tell the reader what you did in a way, and this is very important, in a way that it promotes replicability. What is replicability? An acknowledgeable reader using the same data and the same computational platform will arrive to almost, if not the same results you produced. And you also have to aim at reproducibility. What is reproducibility? An acknowledgeable reader will be able to take your experimental setup, your code, your data, and go further, okay? So aim always at this. Do not hide relevant information. That is a capital sin in science. What comes in the results? Well, by doing what you said you did in the methodology, what did you observe? What was the outcome of your methodology? And what is the discussion? The discussion is the most important part of the paper. The discussion is not a summary of the paper, although it may have a very small part, summarizing. But the discussion is how what you observed or not changed the state of the art. How what you observed or not relates to the hypothesis. how it supports or disproves your hypothesis. So this is the basic structure. And when I work with my students, I usually tell them, put as a starting point these sentences, so you remember what you have to write in each part of the paper. We also mentioned that the paper, to be a scientific contribution, has to be accessible. What does it mean? It means that it has to be published in a venue which is widely accessible to the community. Many times, scientists are accused of publishing in very specialized journals. Well, that is what we do. We speak to a community. We speak to our community. That shouldn't be a criticism. There is another movement that transforms scientific knowledge into layman's terms. But we are talking about a scientific paper. So aim at publishing in those venues that your community reads the most. Let's go back to reproducibility and replicability, and let's use something that Sir Isaac Newton said in the 17th century. He said, "If I have seen further, it is because I stood on the shoulders of giants." I would like you to check the history of this sentence because it has a funny side. It seems he wanted to poke at the scientific opponent who was very short. But apart from that hidden joke, apart from that Eastern egg, what Newton wanted to say is that he first reached what others had done before. That is the reproducibility, reaching the shoulders of the giants. The giants are those that already published in the past. And once you reach the shoulders, you stand up and you look further. That is replicability, helping others to go beyond your work. And I have heard so many times as reviewer, as associate editor, and also as editor-in-chief, I'm sorry, I cannot share my code, my data, because that's part of my PhD. Well, sorry, so don't publish. Don't publish. If you want to publish, science is accessible. Science is reproducible, and science is replicable. Okay? I know this may bother some, but that is my viewpoint and the viewpoint of a large part of our community. These are the definitions, the current definitions published on a very important, very interesting report, which is mentioned in the references, the definitions of reproducibility and replicability. Reproducibility is essentially performing the same steps with the same data and the same setup and obtaining something which is very close to the original results. And replicability is being able to expand these findings by opening the scope of the study, by new data, by new hypotheses, but using the previous study as starting point. Why is this so important? A paper is important because it inflates our ego. We all have egos. Scientists are well known for their egos in general. It also, publishing is important because you need to publish in order to obtain promotions, grants, positions, and the most important thing, leaving ego and promotions aside. A paper advances the scientific knowledge. That is the actual most important, and I risk saying this must be our sole purpose, advancing the scientific knowledge. Let the rest come as a consequence. Putting ego and promotions and grants aside, a paper is not a miracle. A paper is the consequence of a work of high quality. As scientists, and we are all scientists, our duty is advancing science. I know, I am not from Mars. I know we live on a culture where we are all pressed by this publish or perish way of doing science. This is not healthy. This is not good for science. But this is changing. For instance, China used to pay, in China, researchers used to receive money for each paper they published in high quality journals. This is starting to change. You see this paper in Nature, February this year, it's on the news. China bans cash rewards for publishing papers. So we should always aim at quality, not at numbers. Which are the cornerstones of a scientific paper? Remember that a scientific paper is the outcome of a scientific project. The cornerstones are ethics, a good knowledge of the state of the art, and an adequate contribution for the intended audience. Let's look at the ethical part. Each time you submit a paper, either to a conference or to a journal, you put in function a big machine starts working. And this machine is built mostly on ad honorem work performed by the best researchers in the area. If the journal is top quality, as for instance, since AVIC is here, the IEEE Geoscience and Remote Sensing Letters, I know AVIC has the best possible team of associate editors, and these associate editors they invite the best possible reviewers for the papers. So we are talking about first-tier researchers. You submit a paper and you call to work first-tier researchers, and they don't receive a penny for their time. It's all ad honorem work. So value their time and value your time, okay? So you have to avoid some of the worst problems related to ethics, some of the worst ethical problems. Wrong authorship. It is more or less common to see a number of authors and you say, well, did this guy do anything for this paper? Or is this guy there just to impress the reviewers? Well, sometimes authors put important names for prestige, or they do the other way around. They exclude actual authors, well, because they are just PhD students, they will join next paper. Don't do that. The authors are those who really contributed to the paper. Another serious plagiarism, another serious ethical problem, plagiarism. Well, this sentence is so well written in this paper that I will copy it and I will change he for she and singular for plural. Don't. If you do that, acknowledge. You can use and reuse material that has been already published to some extent. But every time you use or reuse material, you have to provide the proper citation. And there are limits to the amount of non-original work that you can use in your paper. Of course, the methodology often comes from other papers, even your own papers. But the results should be totally original, except the part when you reproduce what others did and then you compare. But plagiarism is very bad, and this is happening a lot. Data manipulation. Well, I collected observations from my SAR image, but I cannot fit this data. But if I throw these observations away, the fit is very good. Don't do that. Or do it, but state the data have been censored using this and that criteria. Okay? So do not tweak the data. Do not tweak the plots. Be honest, be sincere. Provide the reader with all the results that you obtain, even in a summary way, in a very brief way. You tell the things that didn't work, because that is also valuable. Conflict of interest. If you work for a firm and you are measuring the quality of images, and you're measuring the quality of images of this firm against the quality of images of the competitor, you have to state that there is a potential conflict of interest. Will this prevent you from publishing? No, but you have to make a disclaimer about possible conflicts of interest. And one of the worst things that you can do as an author, make multiple submissions. You submit a paper to, say, transactions, it's taking too long, you're getting nervous, so you say, I will submit it now to JSTARS, which is faster. Don't, because you will be caught in the act. Even if the journals belong to different societies, doesn't matter, you will be caught. And this is considered, these all are considered serious ethical issues that may cause you trouble with the publisher, okay? And will harm your reputation. That is the worst part of it. So this is a link where you can check the publishing ethic rules of IEEE. They're very clear, very nice, easy to understand, publicly available on the IEEE webpage. So when you have the slides, you can click on it and you will be directed to this publishing ethics, or you can look for them on the IEEE website. But please read them, read and embrace these rules. Now to the state of the art. How do we make a good review of the literature? And this is a problem mostly students have, but also experienced researchers have. You submit a paper and one of the reviewers says, come on, didn't you know that this was done by such and such and such last year? No, I didn't know. So my work is not so strong as I thought. A good review of the literature has to provide the right context for your paper, for your contribution. And a good review of the literature has, in my viewpoint, 3 features. It is complete in the sense that it presents and discusses the main ideas and it clearly identifies where the current knowledge is. This is very important because with this, you will be able to say, this is the state of the art. My contribution is this. A good review of the literature has to be updated in the sense that you have to consider even unpublished work. Come on, unpublished, yes. We have preprints repositories. Probably the most famous one for us is Archive, but we also have TechArchive by IEEE. So check repositories. Lots of very nice preprints there. And the review has to be qualified. When I take a PhD thesis, for instance, or a paper to review, one of the first things I do is I go to the references. If they are all in conferences, in second, third tier meetings, and the special workshop on this or that, all of them, or most of them, I find it suspicious because when I read the paper, I want it to put me on the shoulders of the giants. And the giants are journal papers, indexed journal papers. Okay? So what's the hint for doing a good review of the literature? Conduct a systematic review. It's an art. You should study what a systematic review is. But in a nutshell, you have to answer a well-defined research question by collecting and summarizing all the empirical evidence that fits pre-specified eligibility criteria. In other words, I will show you an example in which I looked for non-local means pulsar filters, or speckle reduction pulsar, or noise reduction pulsar. This is my well-defined research question, those three logical sentences. Where did I perform my research? In the Web of Science database and in the Scopus database. And then I merged the results. I dropped the results that handled applications. So I checked the results, the 500 references, and I took away those that handled only applications because I want to see techniques, new techniques. By doing this, if I tell you, perform this same search of papers, you will obtain the exact same result. So your review of the literature is verifiable, and this is important for us advisors. We check what our student is doing. It is reproducible because I have to obtain exactly the same results, and it's replicable in the sense that we can expand, we can extend the review of the literature. So in a nutshell, something that is an art, a systematic review is something like this. Clear rules for search, clear rules for discarding, a clear, explicit database, should be Web of Science and Scopus at least, the date that you perform the search, and the logical sentences. Okay, with this, anyone will be able to reproduce your review of the literature. Well, not the review, but the collection of material. Then comes the intelligent part, which is reading, understanding, and summarizing. Hints that we don't see so often, but I have been using this and my students also, and we have found interesting results. I will mention two tools, VOS Viewer, VOS Viewer. You upload the results of your research, for instance, in BBTEX format, and you will be able to list the keywords, the topics, the authors, and how they relate. Sometimes, for instance, in this case, we see that they are like kind of two big universes around the terms information theory, and all this to the left is bibliometry. So how to use information theory for bibliometric purposes. And we see the connections, which are the papers that cite most other papers, which are the topics, the areas that cite most other areas. This provides a beautiful insight. It's a free tool, and I strongly recommend you. The image is a link, you click and you will download it. It's relatively easy to use. The other tool that I strongly recommend is Bibliometrics. It has a site, and the authors have published a number of papers. It's a library for R that allows you to read a database from Web of Science, from Scopus, and from other databases, and you can see a number of both graphical and quantitative reports. I am showing here the results of my latest search. I won't tell you the terms because I wrote them somewhere. I don't have them here. But this is a historical direct citation. What do we see here? we see that this paper by Santana Cedrés, published in 2020, cites this paper, of which I am the first author, 2009. And this paper is also cited by this paper by Gambini. Remember the Gambini algorithm? Well, she cited this paper, and this paper also cited, and then you can go enhancing this network. This is a historical viewpoint. The previous one is regardless the year. With this kind of plot, you can see how some topics are evolving a long time. So very useful. And this tool, this bibliometrics, allows you to see many types of beautiful and relevant presentations of extracted from your review of the literature. So don't be afraid if your first search returns thousands of references. No problem. You may use these tools to select where you will be working, which specific topic you will attack in your PhD, in your paper. This all precedes doing the research. This comes before coding, before going to field, before getting the images. This precedes, this comes before. This is your preparation as a researcher that will work on a topic. So another pillar of a good scientific paper is to make a contribution tailored to the intended audience. So you have to make your contribution clear from the very beginning of your paper. For instance, this paper proposes a new non-local means filter weighted with a temperature parameter that is related to the heterogeneity, to the local heterogeneity. I have invented that. Well, that is your proposal. Why? This filter performs better than previously published filters with the same non-local means approach when applied to extremely heterogeneous images, large images. That's a good reason. We did this first by deriving the theoretical properties of the filter and then by implementing it on GPUs. We observed that this approach has a good performance as measured by this and this and that performance measure. That's a brilliant first paragraph of your paper. Then the review of the literature, etc., etc., etc. But make your contribution clear at the beginning of your paper. Don't expect the reader, the reviewer, to dig, to look after your look for your contribution. That's not the work of the reviewer. And target the right audience. What's the right audience? Usually the papers that you read most. So if your favorite paper is IEEE Geoscience and Remote Sensing Letters, aim at that journal. That would be a very good shot. So I started saying that a paper is a summary of a research project. What is a good research project? If you don't have a good research project to start with, you won't end up with a good paper. So what is a good research project? This would take us a long time, but essentially you need a good scientific question. You need to build your project properly. You have to produce adequate contents, and you have to aim always at reproducibility and replicability. And we will sweep rapidly these topics. The most important thing of a scientific project is your scientific question. It is your compass. It will guide you even in the darkness. What is a good scientific question? It has a few features. First, it wasn't answered exactly in the way that you intend to answer it. Okay, so it is original. but it can be answered because there are many fantastic questions that cannot be answered with the tools, the knowledge, and the time we have. It's different, a scientific question for an undergraduate student that has, say, 2 months, 2 months to produce a report than the scientific question for a PhD student who is beginning. They are different. They are different in their depth, in their complexity, and mostly in the time it will take to aim to achieve results. The scientific question has to matter to the community. It has to be original, feasible, and relevant. These are the three characteristics that you have to ask your advisor to provide you with a scientific question: originality, feasibility, and relevance. So assume you already have a scientific question. It is important that your advisor or your colleagues, the members of your research team, are able to follow your advances, are able to follow your progress. So we are dealing with experimental science, or with science that has a good experimental component. So you have to list the things that you have to do. So you go checking, I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this. It's important that the progress can be measured and tracked. How do we build a project? Let me check the time. I identify, this is my opinion, my viewpoint. I identified 6 epochs, 6 stages of the building of a project: doodling, organizing, timing, pricing, writing, and refining. And I will go very fast on each of them. Doodling. I use free playing for doodling. What is doodling? Doodling is throwing your ideas on a mind map. Why on a mind map? Because it is very flexible. It models a tree, and you can make connections. And then you can also put features on each of these nodes. So I start with a central result, and this example made its way in a paper. This example, this plot that you see is part of a paper that I published last year in the Journal of Radars. I was invited to write a survey about the topics that we saw at the beginning. So my first point was a survey. I need to produce a survey. So which are the main elements of this survey? Which are the elements that I cannot avoid writing about? Filter assessment, of course, as you saw, measures of difference, polarimetric data, inference, something that we didn't see in our previous talk, except for one example, intensity data, and deterministic geodesic distances that you saw with Professor Avik, and also research avenues. You see, more or less the topics that we saw in the first part. And then I started exploding these topics. For instance, measures of difference, information geometry, ratio of likelihood, information theory. Information theory branches into divergences, which connect with parameter estimation. By doing this, after, say, 1 or 2 days, I had the whole picture of the structure of my survey paper. And I did this the same for another talk that I presented for, by invitation of Professor Big Bhattacharya, about the Pearson system of distributions. This is an amazing way of organizing your thoughts. You start with the central result, how you will get it, how the elements depend, and which are the relationships. You can use free playing freely. It's a multi-platform. So first stage, doodling. Doodle about your project. Then you can put a little bit more of structure by using a Kanban model. I use Trello for this. And how do we put more structure? We split the doodling into 5 groups of questions. Why? Why do I do this research? There comes the review of the literature, the smart form, and I will tell you what it is, and the benefits. Who will benefit from my research? What I will do? What are the outcomes, and what are the requirements? Who, if we are talking about a team, the external members, the funding agencies, for instance, and our research team. Why do I have to write down who are the funding agencies? Because at some point I will have to make reports for them and I don't want to forget who they are. How I will reach, how I will perform my research, my hypothesis, my deliverables, my restrictions. For instance, in order to present a PhD thesis, I have to publish 2 papers in index journals, such and such. I state that. When and how much, the risks, the timeline, and the costs. We do this, I do this with a Trello board. Each of these elements becomes this. Each becomes a card, and this becomes a column. This is a link that you can, from which you can download this template. I made a template for scientific project, and I called it Scientific Canvas. It's a Canvas model implemented on a Kanban using Trello. Trello is free. You can use it for free. So it's very convenient. Now we will put, we will put more structure. You see, we are progressing into the structure. Timing and pricing. We can do this with Project Libre. You have the link here, you can download it, it's free, but I will not cover this topic today. Essentially, you say who will do what, when, and how much it will cost. No, we are all researchers. You receive salaries, you receive grants, you use computers. All those are costs. And we have, more often than not, to state how much we cost for our university, our research institute. And it's important to have a measure of your costs. Budget. I use Google Sheets. There is a nice template called Annual Budget Tracker that you can change, you can adapt to track the cost, the expenses and the budget of a research project. The contents, and I want to spend a couple of minutes here. Submit a beautiful manuscript. So please use LaTeX, please. LaTeX is simply the best platform for scientific papers. These slides were made with LaTeX. Most journals provide a style, virtually 0 bugs. You don't run the risk of your file being corrupted. Have you seen the problem of corrupted files by Word, by PowerPoint? Well, you don't have this problem with LaTeX. It's 100% portable. The files are very small. The quality is premium. The product is premium if you use it well. Okay, it has a kind of steep learning curve, but it's worth the effort. And most important, it can be easily versioned. You can track the progress of your manuscript, for instance, using Git. BBTeX. Use BBTeX to format your references because the references will be automatically formatted in the journal style, and you won't have missing references or excessive references. Only those that you cite will be inserted in your manuscript. And we have nice interfaces. I recommend JabRef. This is also a link. R. Learn how to use R. R is a fantastic platform for data analysis and also for beautiful and reproducible plots. The plots you saw in the first part, the densities, you can reproduce them. I can send you the 20 lines of code and you will have exactly the same plot. And you can tweak it, you can change it, you can make your own code starting from mine. Reproducibility, and replicability. Now imagine doing the same with a plot full of shadows and 3D things done with Excel. How do you share it? You have to share the Excel spreadsheet and pray for the user to have the same version, the same extensions. Oh, you don't have this problem with LaTeX, BBTeX, and R. And please, I am not a native English speaker. I use Grammarly all the time. Grammarly helps you improve your writing style, clarity, and helps you take those pesky bugs away. There is a free version. LaTeX, BBTeX, and R are 100% free. Grammarly, there is a free version for Grammarly, which is pretty good. Before submitting a paper, prepare a web page with the basic information that includes about who did the paper, who ran the project, and code, running examples, data for producing the plots and the table, and data. Do not come with that story. No, my data is sacred, it is hidden, it is a mystery. Well, don't publish. If your data is not accessible, don't publish. Okay, you paid big money for the data. Provide small samples, at least. Use Git. This web page can be made automatically when you use GitHub, a GitHub repository, but organize the information in a sensible way. This is a proposal I make in a paper that we recently published in JSTARS, how to use all these ideas to make a reproducible paper in remote sensing. So I propose a structure for the Git repository. It's very convenient. So you can click and copy the repository as a template. Where to publish? Conferences and journals. And we go directly into journals. 3 types of journals: those that are paywalled, journals that you access through your university library, or that you have to pay to download the paper. Those that are hybrid, where the authors choose if the paper will be paywalled or the authors pay for making the paper accessible. I hate when I hear you pay to publish. You don't pay to publish in journals. You pay to make your paper accessible. Totally different. Totally different. And use measures of quality to choose where you will send your paper. This is a linear regression, outdated. I promise I will update it for my next presentation, of a regression of article influence score explained by journal impact factor. Remember, when you want to assess the quality of a journal, look at least at 2 quantities. One, popularity, usually measured by the journal impact factor, and the other quantity, its influence. It's, I will remember in the next slide. For instance, the article influence score. Look at both. Here, the confidence bands tell us which are the journals which are close to the regression. And here we have a beautiful outlier, the Geoscience and Remote Sensing magazine, which has a very high impact factor, the highest in the category, and the highest article influence score. So probably you would like to avoid these journals, which I won't tell you which are. Choose and approach a journal. It doesn't make sense to submit a paper to a journal because you found the title fancy, but you never read it in your life. So approach the journals that you read most. Know who's the editor-in-chief. For instance, Avik here is the editor-in-chief of the IEEE Geoscience and Remote Sensing Letters. Check who are the associate editors. Do you read their papers? If you do, probably that's the best venue for you to send your contribution. Do you analyze results already published in that journal? So you cite the journal, not citing for the sake of citing. You cite papers in the journal because you use those results. And prepare your submission following the guidelines. For instance, in the letters up to 5 pages without using font size 2. Okay, so you have to respect the journal guidelines. Should I go to paywall or should I go to open access? It depends. It depends on your funding institution. Some projects in Europe and in the US require publishing in open access journals, others not. And check your funds, because it's very sad when you send a paper, it goes through the whole revision process, it is accepted, and then you say, how will I get $2,000 to publish this paper? And you don't have the money. And the paper is ultimately published, but you end up with the debt with the journal. That's sad. Okay, so secure funds. It's a good idea to look for a balance between journal recognition, journal impact factor, article influence score, speed of publication. Sometimes you need to publish fast. So check what's the mean time, the median time until first decision, until final decision. Check for visibility. Is this journal part of the usual conversations of your scientific community? Do your colleagues mention papers published on the journal? And the practices of your community. Everything boils down to the practices of your community. I don't have to tell you which are the best journals in our remote sensing community. You all know. If you don't, you should go after this information. Well, the cycle, I will skip this. This is the cycle of a paper. You always have to improve the version of the paper. I want to stay for 5 minutes in advertising. It is very important. Remember, we are trying to advance science. We are trying to advance the scientific knowledge of mankind. How do we do this? We do this by having all these elements, although I don't have them all. I left Facebook years ago. I'm very happy for this. But you need an institutional or a personal web page, updated with all the relevant information. You need to have an account for arXiv and TechRive. I don't know how to pronounce it. This belongs to Cornell University, and this belongs to IEEE. You have to have an ORCID account with photo information. You have to keep this updated on ResearchGate, on Publons, on Kudos. Kudos is particularly interesting for us, is where you tell the layman what's your paper about. It's very nice, very interesting. Advertise it in LinkedIn, in Twitter, and in Facebook. So this is part of successful scientific publishing, advertising your work, making your work accessible to the community. Publishing is just the beginning. Our goal as scientists is advancing the scientific knowledge. Publishing is a sine qua non requisite. Without publishing, there is no scientific contribution. But we publish to reach an audience. So reach the audience. In order to do that, position yourself in social media with a good profile, photo, everything. Put relevant and updated information. And use social media to promote the new knowledge that you have discovered, that you have found, that you have published. Well, these are more details that you can check after the talk. And there in your profiles should cross-reference. So reference your preprints, your ORCID profile, have everything this handy. Show this to the community. And at the end, what is a scientific publication? It's lots of things. We have just mentioned a few that sometimes are not so common, don't enter in the discussion. So that's why I chose those topics. But if you want, you can call me and I can talk about any of these particular topics. Remember, your paper is the outcome of a research project. Do not approach an advisor saying, I want to publish. No, I want to perform scientific research. Good scientific research becomes papers. Do not start your paper saying, I did this, I ran 10,000 simulations of this and then. No, nobody cares what you did. The importance of what you did becomes evident when you do a good review of the literature. In order to state that, you have to show the state of the art. Therefore, the importance of a qualified, complete, and updated review of the literature. State clearly your hypothesis. What's your question? What's your contribution? The methodology should promote reproducibility and replicability, provide data and code. The results must be selected such that they support or disprove your hypothesis. Those results that you didn't use can be summarized, but state them too. And the conclusions or discussion is not the summary. The discussion is how your paper changed, shaped the frontier, which is the state of the art. Okay? How to fail? But English. Use Grammarly. Please study English. Plagiarism, it's fatal. Multiple submission. You will be punished if you do this. Erring the public. Submitting a computational paper to a mathematically oriented paper or the other way around. Okay? Choose wisely your venue. If you don't specify clearly your contribution, the reviewer starts and what is this about? Okay, he did this and that and then, but what is this about? Why am I reading this? Make it as confusing as possible. It will be rejected after the second paragraph. Okay, it has to be crystal clear. It has to be boring. Make your paper boring because it's so clear, it's so linear. It doesn't have surprises. It's not a mystery novel. Make it irreproducible. If the reviewers ask you to send the code, you say, no, I'm sorry, I lost the code, the pen drive burned. Forget it. You will not publish that. And make it ugly if you want to have it rejected at once. Make very B.Sc plots as the defaults in Excel, for instance. Those are awful. Okay, and this concludes my talk. Sorry I had to run, but thank you very much for your attention. Congratulations to the brave participants. And of course, I am ready to answer your questions by email or whatever. Thank you very much. And thanks again, Andrea. Thanks again, Avik and Carlos, for helping me reach this point. Thanks a lot, Salwa.
Thank you, Alejandro.
Thank you very much, Alejandro. It was incredibly useful talk, and we have a question already. So
yes, I see.
How much time should be spent on literature review? That's a nice.
Yes, it's a very good question. Your whole life as a scientist should be spent doing review of the literature. So if your question is, what's the percentage? I don't know. It depends on each one. When I was a PhD student, my Fridays, morning and afternoon, were devoted to sitting at the library because on Thursdays, we received the new journals. So I spent the whole Friday at the library checking the papers that I wanted to read later, but never stop doing a review of the literature, because that is your soul. That is the place in the scientific universe where you are standing, okay? And then from that point, you want to walk.
Nice, very nice question and very nice answer, I have to say. So it was a very nice pair on this side. Yeah, but there's another question. We're asking for a rule of thumb for tracking your
Yes,
readings.
I use JabRef. How do I do this? For curiosity attacks. I want to know if somebody used the lambda family of distributions for this problem. So I go into Web of Science. I perform a superficial research, but okay, I am old. I am 60. So I kind of know how to make queries in Web of Science. I download the references and then I upload them into JabRef. I check the abstracts and I go directly to the conclusions. That's essentially how I proceed. Then I decide if this paper, if I will go deeper into this paper or not. And I have a crazy data warehouse approach to literature review. Once I download a paper, I never throw it away. So currently I use JabRef for this. Currently my file of references has more than 10,000 entries. Have I read 10,000 papers? No, but they are there. They are there just in case. And they grow, and it grows, and it grows.
Nice,
Thanks
nice.
you, Emma.
Okay. There is, I mean, there are several people that are, okay. I will give you the congratulations from the audience later at the end, but for now there are questions coming. So how do you overcome something as when one paper that has been rebutted is considered as industry standard just because the rebuttal is not as popular as the paper? Okay.
I'm not sure.
It's a bit of a tricky question.
Sometimes I have faced this as editor-in-chief. For instance, when people describe a new satellite, a new platform, is this a scientific contribution? It depends. Most submitted papers, when I was editor-in-chief, they were rejected because the review of the literature was poor, and or because the paper did not state clearly what was the purpose. So if I say, we built this satellite and we used screws and nails and steel, and who cares? Maybe somebody working in the engineering, in the technology part. But if your design optimized new criteria, and these criteria, multivariate criteria, were solved by using, I don't know, neural networks, evolutionary computing, well, that may be fantastic. Or if your new satellite is able to see things that other sensors don't see, fantastic. That might be a wonderful contribution to a remote sensing journal. But you see, the same object, a new satellite or a new sensor, can be presented for different communities in an acceptable scientific way. My best hint is read a lot of scientific papers. In this way, you will know what the community is used to read. While working on a project, if not mentioned, sorry. Which software would you recommend to create high quality images? I use R, but I don't recommend it. It works wonderfully for small, very, very small images. When I want to go into larger images and put layers of information, I ask help to good Snap users. Snap is very good, but I don't know how to use it. I work with samples. Remember my first talk? Yeah, that's what I do.
So there is another one.
Yes, if not mentioned by the funding agency, how to select the journal category for the publication? Well, do you have money? Do you want fast review? There are journals that comply with this. You don't have money to pay for open access, and you have time to wait for amazing reviews and to have a paper published in journals where you can be very proud of. Well, there are also journals with that profile. In the middle, you have a very nice journal, excellent journal, JSTARS, which is open access and not as expensive as most open access journals, and also has a great reputation. So if your contribution is like a hit on a specific target that matters to lots of people in your community, and you can tell the story in 5 pages, letters. If your paper has a theoretical part, solid, you made all the experiments that you needed to make, and it is a long paper, transactions. If it is in the middle, not so much theory, but more experiments than those that fit in 5 pages, JSTARS. If you are ready to write a survey, a valuable survey, go for the magazine, IEEE Geoscience and Remote Sensing Magazine. How much do you spend serving as blind reviewer for a journal? Okay. I was invited a lot before I started being associate editor. So kind of 2 or 3 papers per month, and I am a pain. I am a pain as a reviewer because I read the paper from the very beginning to the very end, to the last point. I am terrible. I am terrible because I am curious. I am a curious creature. So I used to review 2 to 3 papers per month. When I started being associate editor, I started declining because of conflict of interest. As editor-in-chief, I declined most invitations to review papers. Now I am starting back, say one paper a month, but I choose very precisely things that, first, I can contribute. Second, of course, things that I understand. Third, things that arise my curiosity. Okay, in those cases I accept reading, but remember, I am an old guy. I am 60. If you are a young researcher, tease your curiosity, widen your view of the scientific universe, but always only accept if you can make a constructive criticism and constructive recommendations. Only in that case. By constructive, I don't mean accept all. No. I mean, I didn't like this because of this. I suggest you to do this or this. Constructive is like that. Not constructive, very destructive is saying, I didn't like it. You're not there as a reviewer to like it or not. That's not your role. Destructive is saying, this has been done, and not saying where, by whom. Okay? So be constructive, always, in every parcel of your life, but especially as a reviewer. Provide good hints, be generous as a reviewer, you have to be generous.